Can you imagine having a dream that you worked for and worked towards for many years, and then it finally got to the point where it looked like you had accomplished it, only to have it soon kind of evaporate? How would you feel in a situation like that, and how would you face those that knew that you had finally gotten to that point? Well, today we're going to talk with someone who actually experienced that very situation and talk about how they actually had to repurpose and see what it is that they needed to do in life that didn't go according to the plans that they originally had. So welcome to podcast number 5 of the Audacious Faith Podcast. Many people get excited about football. It's one of America's favorite pastimes. And it starts early on, doesn't it? From Pop Warner type football all the way up. And then it gets to high school, what's known as the Friday Night Lights. People get excited and they pack the stadiums and they cheer everybody on and they root for their school. And then for those who do well enough in high school, some are fortunate enough to get the opportunity to go and play in college. And then for the few that do well enough in college, they get to pursue that dream of the NFL. Well, I have a special guest with me today that I'm very happy to have joining us, someone who not only went through that whole thing, but had a successful college career at the University of Utah, so successful that he then found himself with the opportunity to be in training camp for the Kansas City Chiefs. And then from there, it kind of took a turn, which we will talk about today. And I think that you're going to learn a lot. This is a good friend of mine, someone that I know very, very well. He's doing some great things in life, and you're going to really enjoy hearing from him. So, Mr., and I'm going to pronounce it the proper way, Siaosi, Aiono, correct? Good to have you with us today.
Thank you.
So let's go ahead and get a little bit acquainted for people that don't know you. It could be said with some accuracy that you come from a large family, right, which is a great thing, right? And why don't you go ahead and kind of tell a little bit about your family, your upbringing, and maybe some of the events which led in your football career.
Yeah, so I grew up, like you said, with a very large family. There was never less than about 15 to 20 people that were living in our house at any given time. So it was never a dull moment in our childhood. A lot of moving parts in our household. So I come from, if I want to just talk about, my mother, there's 5 of us that came from her. But, we have a bunch of cousins that we grew up in the same house that we consider, brothers and sisters. So, but as far as sports, and kind of backtracking a little bit as far as the upbringing, it was very family oriented. We did everything together, and was raised by a lot of different people. My mom always talks about how it takes a village to raise a child, and that was literally it. We had from my grandfather, my grandparents, my grandmother, to my parents, to my aunties and my uncles. They all had a big role in how we were raised, as far as our, brothers and sisters that we were talking about. So, and then as far as leading into sports, football specifically, it's a funny story because I actually tried football when I was a kid, and I played flag football. And my mom likes to tell this story a lot, but I was playing flag football right here in Baldwin Park, so not too far, and my older brother was playing tackle football already, and I had the opportunity to play a little bit, and I specifically remember a time where we were huddling, and for some odd reason, I started skipping across the field. So I skipped all the way, biggest kid on the field, and I was skipping all the way to the huddle. And that was the last time I played football as a kid. So
did you realize you were skipping?
I don't think I realized what I was doing at the time, but now that I'm older and I have a son, and I can probably picture, what was going through my mom's mind when she saw the biggest kid skipping across the field.
Like,
so
please make him stop, right?
So that was a little bit about football. As far as a child, I never played again until I actually got into high school. And when I got into high school, it was something that I really didn't know anything about. I played baseball first, believe it or not. My oldest brother, I was always in his footsteps, like trying to be like him because he was a very, very, very well-rounded athlete. And baseball had no weight limit. So sports, as far as football, we had to weigh in week in and week out. And my mom didn't want me to move up in weight class. I'd be playing with kids that were, 3 or 4 or 5 years older than me. So I waited on that end in the sense of when I got into high school, that's when I started playing football for the first time. So when I put on the pads, you can imagine, it was like Bambi trying to walk for the first time. That was how I pictured myself playing football for the very first time. So I had the look, I looked the part, and it was a journey from there. But if I had to go back and kind of give credit to the two people, there was a lot of people that helped me through, but the two people was probably my mother and my father. So my mother, because she kept me in line in school, and she realized through past experiences of family members and her brothers going through that process that there's no such thing as getting to another level without school. So my mom helped me with school, and she was very strict and made sure that football was secondary to school. And then my father, because he's the one that put me in the position to be able to showcase the talent that I didn't know that I had at the time. So he would take me to camps and kind of, put me in positions to kind of grow and be able to tap into what then I found out, as far as a little later, that I had a little bit of talent that I could display to get me to different places. So freshman year was a rough little struggle, and then sophomore year I started to get my feet under me, and then that's when I received my first offer. Was my sophomore year. I believe it was San Jose State, and then I went to a camp out there, and again, credit to my parents. We didn't struggle. As far as my parents, they did a really good job making sure that us as kids didn't feel like we were struggling. But being a parent now, I realized that they were really good at hiding things in a sense of making sure that we were protected and knowing that we had everything we needed. But we had fundraisers, not knowing. It was just one of those things where we thought it was a fun thing going on. Right. But then I realized that it was a fundraiser to get me to the places that I needed to be able to go to football camps and things like that. So that's where I received my first offer. And then from there, it was, offer after offer. And I was blessed enough to be able to finally make that decision to go to Utah. So
you bring up a good point there about parenting, in the sense that, good parents,
right,
like you had, do their best to take care for their kids, but they don't put the burden. They let the kids be kids and do what they need to do.
Right.
They're doing stuff behind the scenes, but they're not necessarily telling you everything that they're doing. But they're giving you every opportunity that they possibly can, which is pretty awesome. Now, I'm imagining that even though you didn't have a lot of experience in football going into high school, did you have a growth spurt in high school, or you were pretty much already there?
So 8th grade to freshman year, I had a pretty good, as part of pretty decent growth spurt. Okay. Believe it or not, I was actually this height through high school. I wasn't as big or filled as far as, I guess what you want to call it, baby fat when you were a kid, but I just wasn't built this way yet. But yeah, I had the size that I passed the look test, is what they called it.
Got it.
The eye test.
So the coaches must have been almost drooling on themselves when they saw you walk in there, right?
Yeah, little did they know I didn't play a lick of football till the year before, but like I said, I was blessed enough to be able to get to that level, to be able to at least show enough to pique their interest. So.
Awesome. So then you get the opportunity to go to college. You end up choosing the University of Utah.
Right.
Okay. Now in college, you're away from home, so it's a whole different type of deal.
Yes.
I know you grew up where faith was an intricate part of family life and everything, but now you're off by yourself. You're pursuing this dream towards the NFL. So is there a point where it becomes distracting? Is there a point where you kind of maybe started to lose your way a little bit, or does that happen?
Yeah, as far as faith-wise?
Yeah.
Yeah, so good point, because it was that was a big part of my life. Now that I look back from where I'm at now, where I guess there's no way to really put it. I kind of put it on the back burner. Not kind of. I did put it on the back burner because I became consumed with football, meaning that this was my way out. You know, I was blessed enough to be able to be the first one in my immediate family to go to college. So, you know, and at that time I had my son, you know, and I wanted to put my all into football. So, yes, to answer the question, yeah, it was on the back burner, and it wasn't the center of my life at that time.
Sure. Okay. So, and that happens to a lot of people, obviously, as they go through the journey and they start getting something in their head. It's a very common thing to have happen. So then you get through college, and then you get the opportunity to go to the NFL.
Right.
And this is something that you had been, I mean, at least from the high school time when you start, you know, really doing football, it becomes a big part. And of course, the reason you're focusing so much and maybe to the point of obsessing in college is because that's what you're pushing towards.
Right.
What about the NFL to be able to get there? In your mind, how is that going to change life? What was the most intriguing? Was it just the raw competition of it? Was it the fact that as far as salary and taking care of everything, it was going to change everything for you and your family? What part stood out the most to you?
Yeah, well, I'll take it back just a little more as far as, you know, being around football a lot. There's a lot of guys that I hear that dreamt about going to the NFL since they were a kid. I didn't have that dream because I never played football.
Yeah.
So I didn't realize that I was actually going to be decent at football until I received my first offer. It was just something that I fit into as far as, all right, you're a big kid, we're going to try football out. And then it wasn't until, like I said, my sophomore year where I realized that if I put in the work that I could actually get to a level where a lot of guys have been talking about my whole childhood. But that wasn't really my dream. You know, I always heard about football, but it didn't become something that I felt like I could reach until I got into college.
So you're saying it wasn't necessarily your dream. So did you have a dream before that and then it kind of changed or not really?
Yeah, no, not really anything specific, you know, as far as, this is what I wanted to be. But I can honestly say that I wasn't dreaming about going to the NFL since I was a kid.
Okay.
That became a reality when I was in college. And then I started to realize through my high school process of getting recruited that, hey, maybe I have a shot of getting to a place that not a lot of people can get to. And then that's when I started attaching a lot of things that maybe I wanted to accomplish to the dream of NFL, getting there and reaching that level. So when I got through Utah, you know, when I came out of college, I wasn't really a high-profile player, you know, in the sense of, okay, this guy's going to get drafted in the, you know, 4th or 5th round. As a matter of fact, I went in to a camp as a free agent. So, but I knew that I had the ability to hang with everybody that was there. So I started to attach, okay, this is how I'm going to get my son the life that I always wanted, you know, not necessarily that I needed anything growing up, but I wanted to do things that, you know, that I'd never experienced before. You know, being able to buy my own home and just do the things that I wanted to do. And then I attached money to that, knowing that, hey, if I just make it on the team, I'm going to at least make 6 figures. You know, not even playing. And being in the position where I'm in now and looking back, I attached a lot of things to materialistic things. So knowing that if I just stood on the sideline not being dressed, you know, and then going to being dressed and just being on the sideline, I would make more money. But I'm doing the same thing, just sitting on the sideline. But now I have a helmet and a shoulder pads on.
Got it.
And that's a raise if you understand how football works. And then going from the field or from the sideline being dressed onto the field, the moment you cross over that lines, that in itself is now a raise because you're making more money, you're actually playing now. So I started to attach a lot of those things to why I was playing football instead of, you know, high school where it was more innocent in the sense of, man, I just want to see what I could do, you know.
So that become the main focus then? I mean, was it more that than the passion for the game?
Yes, at that moment in my life, knowing that I was so close knocking on the door and I showed up to the facility, yes, 100%.
Okay, so you get there and you're there and you're thinking about this, and then, I mean, when you walk in, I mean, hardly anybody gets the opportunity to walk in as a player to an NFL training camp. So maybe share a little bit, what's that like when you're walking in?
So first, you walk into a facility, especially a facility like Kansas City. It reminded me of college again, or playing football for the first time. Nobody knew who I was. If you're not drafted, you're somebody that could be easily replaced.
Okay.
And so I had that feeling when I got off the plane, getting into the bus, going into the facility, knowing that I had a lot of odds against me. So on the flip side, though, it was like, man, I can't believe I'm here.
Yeah.
I picked up a helmet and it had the logo on it. At that time, if I would have made it past where I was at, I would have been number 59. And just knowing and seeing my last name on a practice jersey was cool. As far as understanding that, man, I made it here.
Right.
Not necessarily on the team, but walking through the doors as someone that could potentially make the team at that moment was pretty cool for me.
Awesome. So you were there, you start going through, what's the process? So they start running practices.
Yeah.
And then they're basically, obviously they have more people
Right.
than who they're going to keep.
Right.
So it's just a filter out process, or what's the purpose of even having more people?
So, for example, there was a couple of guys that I came in with, okay, that weren't signed agents yet, or weren't signed players yet.
Okay.
Were free agents, came in, and it's just a way for them to, maybe they missed something, or maybe they, have an opportunity to see somebody that didn't get picked up, that was on their radar, but now they have the ability to evaluate them with their team, with their schemes and things like that.
Right.
So a perfect example, there's a guy that I was playing with that wasn't signed at all. And there was a guy that actually was a free agent that did sign a contract. And by the end of the time that we were there, that guy that came as a free agent that had no contract ended up taking that guy's spot. And then the other guy that felt like he was safe at least to get through camp ended up getting sent home as well. So
Got it. Okay. So you're there. How long were you there, and about how many days did you do this before the announcement?
yeah, it was really short as far as actual practices, about 4 days.
4 days.
Yeah. And then from the start to finish, it was about a week and a half, yeah.
So tell us then. So the announcement comes, right? How did the announcement come?
Yeah, it's not even an announcement. I came back from the third practice, or on the I think it's either the third or the fourth day. Came back into the locker room, and there was a plane ticket there. So that's exactly how it happened.
So it's just like the plane ticket sitting there.
Yeah, the plane ticket was in my locker.
Nothing else needs to be said.
No, and yeah, so that's exactly how it happened. And next thing you know, I was on my way home, and that was it. From there, I had an opportunity to go to Canada, but at the time, I felt like my ego and pride was in the way. So I told my agent if I wasn't going to go to the NFL, then I was going to hang up the cleats. So.
Got it. Okay, so that's got to be. It's kind of like you worked your tail off or something, and then it's like, here's your pink slip, right? Thank you very much. No conversation, no nothing, just the plane. I guess it's nice that they paid the plane, but that's about it. Okay, so obviously all the dreams that you were having, all the thoughts about how you were going to be able to take the six-figure salary and how it was going to change things. So what was the plan B?
I had no idea.
You had no idea. So you're leaving with your plane ticket. Feeling that was your shot. And now the shot basically was shot down. All right. Credit to you in the sense that you even got one. But, most people don't get that far. But, so was there a thought of, I'll come back next year? Was there any?
Yeah, so it happened so early that when I got back, I felt like I still had an opportunity. There's a lot of moving parts that people don't understand that's happening from, OTAs to training camp to the actual preseason. There's tons of moving parts. People losing their job, getting the opportunity, losing the opportunity, and it happens throughout the whole league. So I felt like, okay, if this happened in, I believe, the end of May, man, it's been a long time now. So it's the end of May, I believe it was. And now I felt like I had enough time to go home, reevaluate, see what other places, because I had other opportunities. the good thing about being a free agent is that you'll have a couple of teams that reach out, and it's like one of the few times where you have the opportunity to choose, okay, where do I want to go? Now, you don't have all the time in the world, but it stands true in a sense of like, okay, if I get drafted to this team, then I have to stick to that team. But if I'm a free agent, I have a little bit of wiggle room of like, okay, maybe this team fits me, and I can go here. But, that didn't happen. I came back home and I wanted to talk to my agents about it, and it kind of went cold.
Okay.
And then I didn't want to sit around too long, and then boom, I just got right into working. So.
Okay, so now you're working where? At this point, at that point?
Yeah, at that point I was working at a warehouse.
So you go from, I don't want to make this sound bad.
Go ahead, yeah.
You go from the possible glory of the NFL
Right.
with the Kansas City Chiefs, who a very short time later are extremely competitive, and
Right.
they're in the Super Bowl and all of this kind of thing, to working in a warehouse, which basically is not the dream,
Right.
right? So getting back to the spiritual aspect of faith now. Are you having a conversation? I don't know what was going through your head, but are you starting to think, God, I wasn't a football player. You put me in a situation in high school where you then get me into football.
Right.
People start singing my praises. I get my hopes up. I play college ball. I put all my effort the last few years into here. And then I get there, and then you show it to me. I'm like almost there to the promised land. I'm like right there at the edge.
Right.
And now I'm working in a warehouse. Was there a point where you're like, did I do something? Is this a punishment? Did that ever come to your head?
Yeah, of course. Like I said, through college, my faith was in the back burner. It wasn't the center of my life. So naturally, as a person, I was wondering what the heck happened that I didn't deserve this opportunity. And I was at a place where I was pointing a lot of fingers and kind of counting my good deeds and bad deeds, wondering what the heck went wrong, and being in a low place in life. Maybe not a lot of people realized it, but yeah, all of those thoughts ran through my mind of like, man, why would you do this to me? And asking questions like that instead of, okay, what are you trying to show me? And I was playing the blame game.
Okay. So you were pointing fingers in a lot of different directions.
Right.
Were any of those fingers going towards yourself, or was it mostly another?
It was mostly other ways.
Places,
yeah, other
right.
places, trying to justify. And yeah, like I said, it was a total different person back then.
So we became the victim type of mentality, which a lot of people do.
Right.
Including the victim I'm a victim of God's unfairness.
Right.
Possibly as
Yes.
well. So that didn't necessarily drive you closer to him.
No.
If anything, further away.
Yes.
So you're working in a warehouse, and what's going through your mind in the warehouse? You're thinking,
Yeah.
wow, I'm excited about this warehouse job, right?
Right. Now that you bring it up, because I grew up in a family that's very positive. All right, dust yourself off. Let's go. Let's move forward.
Right.
So I had that in that aspect, but for me, I was the only one that ever experienced anything like that. So it was a lot deeper than just, okay, pick yourself up and let's move forward. Because like you said, I went from potentially going and changing my entire life financially, and doing things that have never been done, to sweeping floors at a warehouse.
Yeah.
So it hit a lot harder. And like you said, I played the victim. And I just didn't know what was next. And I had to look at myself and ask myself, all right, is this what I'm accepting for the rest of my life? Am I just going to stick here and move myself up? Because that's what I was used to. My family is very hard-working people. I'm like, hey, you got a good job, just work your way up. So that was my mentality at the beginning. And, like I said, I was blaming a lot of people, blaming God, blaming why do these people deserve it more than I do type of situation. And but that was my current situation at that time.
Okay. So then God takes you through this journey. You're at this warehouse. About how long were you at the warehouse?
I was there for 11 months. I know exactly how long every job that I stayed at, because I couldn't see myself doing it any further than when the time I said, okay, I'm done.
Okay.
So I was at 11 months with that specific warehouse, and I actually moved my way up through the company. So
Got it. So you're 11 months there, and you already mentioned, God, why is it that you did this to me? And I think in life, and if you're listening to this today, whatever situation you're in or whatever's going in a way that maybe you haven't planned, we always need to ask a question, and that is, what does this mean? And knowing that God is in control, which hopefully we do know, knowing that God doesn't make mistakes, okay, what is the meaning of this, and what am I supposed to learn, and what are you doing for me, even though I don't see it? Okay, so he didn't necessarily do it to you,
Right.
but it felt like it.
Right, at that time, yes.
Right? And so, but he had other plans.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us about how some of those plans started to take shape.
Yeah,
change.
so, that span of my lifetime was about 2 to 3 years.
Okay. Which is a long period of time,
Yeah.
especially when you're young. That's a good portion of your
Right.
life.
About 2 to 3 years, because I was bouncing from job to job, and I even tried to go back to football and do things like that. But, then I got to a place where I was like, you know what, enough is enough. What do I have to do to, receive why all of these things happened?
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't a specific moment where it was like, boom, here we go. It was actually, just a series of things that were happening in my personal life that made me realize, okay, I don't think I was ready. As a matter of fact, I know I wasn't ready to achieve that type of success at the moment that I was at in my life. So once I embraced that and owned that, then I started to understand that maybe I can ask God, okay, now that I know that maybe I wasn't in a position to receive that success, obviously you put me on a path that will teach me what it would look like if that opportunity ever crossed me again. So
Good point. Okay.
yeah, so I started to, own a lot of things. I not necessarily get closer to God or my faith, but I was owning more things in my life instead of playing victim. And the more I own those things, not realizing that I'm actually putting myself in a position to hear God. And all that, like I said, it's not a specific moment, but these things that were happening in my life kind of took me on a journey. And then, that's how I landed in, well, as you know, tenacity.
Okay.
And that right there was probably one of the biggest, biggest changes in my life, for sure.
So you have God who, we could say, in a way, prevented you or stopped you from being successful. Let you see it,
Right.
but then stopped it. But then you come to a point where you realize maybe he had your back,
Right.
right? In the sense that if you had gone successful at that point, your life would have taken a course that it wasn't supposed to take. You don't know. It could have been 2-3 years, have a serious injury, be done, and who knows what other types of decisions
Right.
you possibly would have made at that point. So all along, what seems like chaos, what seems like unfairness, was really a Heavenly Father watching over you,
Right.
right? Taking you then and putting you in a situation that you hated, sweeping floors, doing different things, showing you what you didn't want, right? And giving you the drive and putting it inside to start taking a look at some life and seeing, okay, wait a minute, there's some growth that needs to occur. So you brought up something which is key, and that's that you mentioned about taking personal responsibility,
Right.
which a lot of people never get to the point in life that they do. They'll play the victim for the rest of their life, and because of that, they'll never move forward. So that's a pretty big thing. That's important. So the self-development starts taking place. You start to realize that some things are a little different. There's some growth that has to take place. So then you get approached about business, and you start going that direction, and that leads you into a group of a whole new set of people, right? And God had a plan on all of that as well. Now, one of the things that I think happened is because going back a little bit, in football versus a warehouse job, what's the main difference? In football, you get to be competitive.
Right.
In football, there's goals. In football, there's dreams. There's things you're pushing for. In warehouse, you're sweeping the floor.
Right.
Okay? So a lot of what made you was taken away.
Right.
It was void. It's amazing how sometimes God takes things away that mean a lot to us and are a big part of us, and then finds a way to give them back.
Right.
So did you find that when he then put you in a connection in business, and then it's a competitive thing, it's a team type of thing, you got to compete again, did it kind of make you feel alive again?
Yeah, it did. So going back to real quick, because I think this will be funny to kind of talk about, when I was at the warehouse, talking about competing, and I wanted to work the hardest and kind of just show out so I could move up in the company. So then in the warehouse I started moving stuff physically, and then I became known as because not a lot of people were moving stuff like how
Sure.
I was. I just got out of playing football, and I was moving things around, putting them on shelves, and things that people couldn't carry at the time.
Yeah.
And then I became I ended up being so competitive as far as being able to do my job the right way that I became the human forklift
I was
in
just
our
thinking.
in the warehouse. So that was a joke that ultimately squished my competition drive, because I realized that now I'm just lifting all of these things for people for no reason. So, but going back to your question though, yes, business, the specific business that I got into, as that journey kind of led me to, the self-development, I was in an environment now where I felt like I was familiar with, knowing that, all right, if I'm willing to put in the work, then I can get to a place where I want to get to. And it felt like I haven't been in that place in a long time, because I felt limited in other places. Like I had to wait my turn, or I had to wait in line, whereas this specific business gave me the opportunity to be like, okay, I can compete again. And I feel like that was that opportunity that God gave me again. Not realizing that back then that he had my back the whole time, because I wasn't ready to receive that type of blessing.
Sure.
Knowing that, being in the position that I am now, knowing that he had my back to bring me on that path of success again, to go and earn it the way that I know how to earn it. And I didn't realize that until now. And it's funny because you don't know the lessons or what God's trying to teach you.
Right.
And in big situations like that, because that could have altered my life, not just mine, but my sons and my family's. But if he didn't have my back, and have me go through 2 to 3 years of going through that journey of learning how to take ownership and not playing the victim, then I wouldn't be in a position to appreciate what success is going to come my way when I do get back into the environment where I can go and be familiar with what I am, as far as
Right.
competing.
So there you go. So, and as far as not wasting anything, because I don't believe that God wastes the opportunities. I
Right.
mean, obviously football gave you a discipline. Football gave you a drive.
Right.
Football made you goal-oriented, work hard, all these type of things. Okay? Now he gives the competition aspect of your life back, so it's not wasted. Okay? He gives the earning potential back,
Right.
but not instantly. So
Right.
it's a different thing. You got to work for it a little bit harder. But the potential is there, all things that you can grow into. So really, he didn't take anything away.
No, not at all.
He kind of...
If anything, he gave me more now,
Right.
because I was sheltering myself and not receiving any of that. So now that I was humbled and put in my place, to realize that now he did have my back, knowing, because at that specific time in my life there was nobody that had my back.
Right.
So fast forward to where I'm at now, realizing that, man, that was everything I needed. I just didn't realize it at that time.
So then you build relationships in this new environment that you're in. And through the
Right.
course of those relationships, you get an invitation,
Yes.
all right? An invitation that usually a guy like you probably would have just
Yeah.
passed over, right? So you get an invitation to go to a worship night, which was taking place on the very stage that we're sitting right now,
Right.
right? A place that you had never been. And what made you decide to accept the invitation? It wasn't a high pressure. It had nothing
No.
to do with the job. There's nothing like that, right?
Not at all. it was just safe to come enjoy some time. There's going to be some music playing. I like music. And, like I said, I was in an environment that I felt like, helped me at that time. So, I just went with everybody. It just felt good. And then I showed up, and that was the end of it as far as how I got here,
So you walk in the doors, not knowing what to expect. You sit there, you enjoy the music. Was there any sense that night was there a sense of God that night, that particular evening, or it was more of just an reintroduction?
Yeah, not necessarily that specific night. It was more of like, man, I like this, environment. I like the way it felt, and I was surrounded with good people, and if it sounded good, and I was like, okay, cool, I could do this. I could listen to this again, and I was just like, all right, when's the next one? That's when I was thinking right there at that time.
So relationships matter.
Right.
And God leads us to people in life. But relationships matter, then you continue to return to normal worship services and things like that. And so in this journey then that God is doing and putting you there, how did you start to find him again? What started to happen?
Yeah, so naturally, the one thing that I loved about coming to church was the music. But not only the music, though, I wasn't really used to having a live worship group. And then I would start reading the lyrics that you guys would sing, or that the worship group would sing. And then it kind of just led into the messages that were said too. Now that, I'm where I'm at now, I understand that those are all put together on purpose. So as far as, the message and the music, so it was like a setup to like, okay, if I'm listening to the music, and then I realize, okay, the message has a lot to do with the music. So that's kind of how I was starting to pay attention and be more conscious of it. So.
Now, you mentioned that, and I do want to clarify on that, because you mentioned how it's set up on purpose.
Right.
And it is set up on purpose. But I will tell you that it's not necessarily always set up on purpose by human beings.
Right.
Because for those who don't know, so many times, like a last song that went right with the message, the last song was picked and the message wasn't even chosen yet, and yet somehow it ends up being the perfect thing. So I do agree with you in the sense that it's chosen on purpose. But often we're amazed to see how God arranges that. So he's working in your life, and then gradually as he's doing that, you came to really understand that the whole journey that got you through where you were, all the twists and turns, and now that got you to the point you are right now, he obviously had his hand on all of it.
Right. And it was at that time where I started to come to church and listen and actually learn that I realized that he never left in the beginning. Whereas at that time in my life, I felt like nobody was on my side. But like I said before, sometimes you got to go through things to, understand what he was doing for you. And you might not get that message until a couple of years later, like how I did. So that was big time for me, for sure.
So it draws a question that's coming to my mind at this point. There's a lot of people out there that are going to listen to this at various times, and they're trying to take life by the horns and make it happen. Right? And maybe they're feeling as if at times they're beating their head against the wall, getting one roadblock after another. A lot of people feel that to put their life in the hands of God and to follow God, well, they don't have time for that because there's too much life that they need to be taken care of.
Right.
So doing it both ways, what would you tell them as far as advice is concerned, as far as taking that step of faith? They can try to do it on their own, but is it a lot harder, would you say?
Yeah, it's 10 times, it's a billion times harder. I have conversations with God all the time, and I used to think that it had to be so formal, where I had to, just set up the prayer and start, like, man, I could talk to him at any given time. And it doesn't necessarily make the situation that maybe you're going through easier, but it's someone that's in my corner that I know that I could talk to, and it never fails. I was just talking to somebody about this, about how, making sure that something simple like paying tithing, right? I haven't missed it, and I don't know how long, but it's just little things that you're trusting that he's going to be there for you. Even though you don't know what situation might come up, and it never fails every single time. Even when you feel like it's about to crumble under your feet and you start to have a little doubt that starts seeking in, and all of a sudden it comes through in so many different ways, not just financially, but emotionally, with family, whatever that may be. And that's my ultimate going through both paths, is just having full trust and knowing, having that faith of like, look, I may not know what's going on, I may not understand what's going on, but you're here with me, and I know that. So that gives me the confidence to keep pushing forward and walking into the unknown, and that's something that I carry with me, knowing the two paths that I've taken, and that's something that only I understand in a sense of my personal perspective, but I may not understand what everybody else is going through out there. But what I do know is that it's a lot harder, and that this life is not meant to be walked alone. And I thought that it was like that in the beginning, realizing that I made it a lot harder than what it was supposed to be if I just had faith and kept that the center of my life. But at the same time, I feel like he knew what he was doing, and it made me who I am today. And not that I am done growing or done, there's a lot of work that I got to do personally in faith too as well, but it gives me, the excitement to continue to walk that journey. So
Awesome. So now that you're at this point, and like you just mentioned, you haven't arrived yet, but you're where you need to be at this point in the journey. Do you have a sense of the future? Has God revealed any of this to you? Are there some things that, obviously things are revealed over the course of time.
Right.
But what is your sense of where it is you're going or what you're supposed to do?
Yeah, there's no doubt that I have. When I was walking on my own and trying to do everything by myself, I felt like, oh man, I have to have this in place. I got to have this in place. I have to have this in place, and this has to be the right way. Now I walk with no doubt in my mind. Do I still make mistakes? Yes. But it's a lot different knowing that there's no doubt in my mind than to, leave everything in his hands than to try to walk this life on my own, So that's what be the difference, is no doubt for sure.
All right. Well, this has been a great conversation, and we're going to finish it up with one last question. It's kind of a little freebie. I like to do these at the end of the podcast. And that is that, again, we don't know who's going to be listening to this and when. And so maybe there's somebody out there right now listening to this who kind of thought they had their life figured out, knew where they were going to go, and then it kind of blew up.
Right.
All right, blew up in smoke. And they're possibly no plan B right now. They're kind of trying to figure out which end is the way up. And maybe they're a little defeated at the moment. Okay? What would be your advice to them?
For me personally, now that I am where I'm at, I would say, maybe you guys are like me in the beginning, where you're walking, you feel like you're by yourself, or maybe you are, in a position like myself right now, where you are walking with God. But either way, this applies to everybody that's out there. And I ask myself this question when I go through things that I might not fully understand. And then, whether you want to say, God, what is this going to teach me, or what are you putting me through, and what is it going to bring me? If I ask myself that question, then I always find out. It may not be exactly right there and then, but I'll always find out the answer and realize that, man, I realize that these things are happening for myself, and because of that, I understand the bigger picture of what's going on. Because sometimes we don't see what our past, or we don't see past our current situation. So it's a lot easier to be stuck in there. But if you just switch the smallest things and be like, God, why are you putting me through this? Or what are you trying to teach me? And if you're in a position where you feel like God's against you, then say, what are you trying to teach me? Why am I going through this? For me, it can work on either path that you're on. So that would be my advice.
Awesome. Well, it's
Yeah.
been a great time sharing, and we want to just encourage you to share this podcast. Also, if you're watching it on YouTube or on one of the other platforms, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel. We want as many people to be blessed as possible. Thank you so much for joining us today. This was the Audacious Faith Podcast. God bless.